Right. So yesterday what we have seen is like how the router transformation divides the data into different tables. And we have prepared the three source queries basically to validate the data between the source and target. Now I have logged into the TDBU schema and we will verify that data and everything. Right, so I'll actually do the complete functional testing for one example, maybe the first query example. So you might have to repeat the same process for other examples, for other queries as well. So this data is actually loaded into the ODS underscore employee sales table. So the first one is in the functional testing that you're going to do is your data model validation. I think we have already discussed about this, about this data model validation. And the second one to start with is your count validation between the source and target. What is the source query one? See, basically I'm going to find out the number of records should have been loaded into the ODS underscore employee sales table. So when you look at it, select from, and instead of this query, so just replace the complete query, and you would like to find out the total records should have been retrieved or retrieved from the source. So try and execute. So there are total 14 records should have been loaded into the target. And let me just also get the data, count of records for this. Select count of star from ODS underscore employee sales. So which you have. So try and execute. So this will give you the total number of records. Here is also 14. So 14 and 14 are matching. So this count validation is perfect. And the third one is to validate the duplicate values in the target table. So I'm going to verify, maybe for one table I'll just verify, because we have total 3 target tables, and you can verify the same for the other 2 as well. So to start with this, let's say select from, and you need to actually find out, it's like it has the same structure just like your ODS employee, and group the data based on that. And what is the column name that you have? That is your employee ID, comma name, comma date hide, and you have a type code, so which you have on the count of records which are there. So employee ID, name, date hide, and the type code which you have. So group the data by using this and execute it. So we are looking for records which are being repeated more than once at the row level. So when you try and use this, it should return 0 records, right? So this is your duplicate validation on the other target table. And the next one is about the minus query validation, or I call this as a column level data validation. Column level data validation, how you use. So we have a source query. See, once you have a source query, it's pretty easy that you can easily validate the a minus query or whatever. So let's take the source query for a table 1. We called it as a query 1, and use the minus. And we are having a similar type of a column. So let me just copy all the column names. When you are writing a minus query, make sure that the order of the columns is same and the data type of the columns is also same. So I'm trying to validate the data between the query 1 and the data what is being loaded into the target. So when you try and execute this, so this will give you, this should return ideally 0 records, because it's the same data what is being loaded. So we're not finding any records here. That means our validation is perfect. And the next one which we have is about the null validation across all the columns. So what you're going to verify. So let's say if you have an employee ID column, I think it's a similar query what we have written. So employee ID and count the number of records. So for this column, how many null values are present in the ODS underscore employee sales. See, we are actually trying to write all these queries only for one table. Similarly, you have to write for all the other tables as our target tables are multiple in this case is null. So union all, let's say if you would like to go for a name column and the date hide column, so you can even write it name, and this is also a name. And similarly, if you have to verify it for date hide, date hide is null. So run and see whether you have any duplicate records. So it doesn't have any duplicate records here. So if you see, this has all the zero null values which are present. And the next one is referential integrity. See, it's basically referential integrity is again is not applicable as we do not have a parent-child relationship between this. So most of the time when you're validating the referential integrity, probably you can validate it for the fact table and then verify the data. So this is how we can validate the data integration. I mean, this for a functional testing for a router example. And I hope it's more. I hope you're good with this. And if you look at the system testing, so basically it's the same thing again. When you look at the system testing, so we have to verify it for a parameter file validation and all those things. So this is our working folder. Right click on it and click on open. Right. So now you have this WF underscore ODS employee. No, not this one. So basically ODS underscore employee types. So drag it. So when you go here, let's say in the properties tab, we don't have any parameter file. And even when you edit the workflow and go to the properties tab, there is no parameter file which is present over here. So one thing is parameter file validation is not applicable. So the second one which you're going to give parameter file validation, and the second one is your email task validation. Email task validation. So here, so you have to verify for a session failure email and workflow failure, workflow success, all these things. So I'll just show you the place like where they'll associate the email task and all. So maybe in the later examples also we can check. If you go to the components tab, in the components tab, if you see, there is something called as a on success email. So similarly, like you can also associate with on failure email. Whenever a workflow is being triggered, I mean, whenever the session is failed, it will basically send an email to the support team recipient saying that so and so session is failed. So if the email is, I mean, if the failure email is associated with the session, if you edit it, when you go to the components tab, you'll identify whether the failure email is associated or not. So how would you go about it? Let's say session, and you need to go for edit. And when you edit it, there is a components tab in this, and under this, you'll find something called as a on failure email, on failure email which you have. So for a workflow failure also, like if you go to menu and then the workflow tab, under a workflow tab you have edit workflow, and under edit workflow you'll have something called as a on suspension email. So basically you'll have that on suspension email, so that will be there. So if you go here, edit, and here the failure email will be associated. So if you'd like to check which email, which email address it is basically sending the email, you can go here and then verify. So here, if you look at the email failure testing, so here they'll mention the email username, an email subject, an email text, but in this example they have not referred it. But if you want to find out the which recipient it is sending the email and all, you can find out the email username. That basically, how did I validate here is that when you open the session, you'll have a task here, and just drag and drop the task. You'll understand like what email address it is associated with, and that you can easily determine from here. So that is more about the system testing, and here the command task validation is not applicable, and even the event wait task validation is not applicable because the workflow doesn't contain that. So command task validation, suppose if you have to verify something and all, that is not applicable. And one more thing is that you need to verify the data in the bad file. See, basically what happens is that when you see that a number of records which are rejected by Informatica while processing the data, in the sense, suppose let's say when Informatica is reading the data, processing it and loading it, for some reason, for some database issues, records have been rejected by the database. It has not accepted those records. In that case, what happens is that the data will be rejected, and that rejected records will be written into the rejected file or a bad file. So you need to verify whether this rejected file is really having the records or not. So how do you verify the bad file name and the path? So basically, when you go to the mapping tab, for each and every target, you'll have a reject file name and the reject file directory. So this is a file name what you have, and this is a reject file directory. So it's basically you can easily determine the rejected records in the session statistics itself. So when you go to the workflow monitor and get the run properties, there in the run properties itself it will mention how many records are rejected by this. So when you go here, let me just log into our working folder, enter this. So if you go for source target statistics, here itself it will tell you if at all if there are any rejected records. In case if it is rejected, so how can I validate the data? So in order to validate if it is in the real time in the server, so like what happens is that like you'll have a path which will be defined for a bad file directory, so which it is called as bad file dir. So you need to go to this path. This path will change from project to project. Like when you want to verify, you can always ask your developers where these file path is being initialized, basically. App, info, server, and then the info shared. So this path generally will be available. So from this, the path is same. So installation directory sometimes changes from project to project. So this path is like it will be changing from project to project. So if you are verifying it in the VM, like basically in the VM, you will not use WinSCP or something. So it will be in the C folder, C Informatica, and you have a 951, let's say, server, and from this it's the same, whether it is a Windows or Unix, everything is same, info shade, and then the bad files. So if you have to get into this path and then verify the data, see, so you can just log into this WinSCP now and enter the details here, and this is our path, and the username what we have is Oracle, and the password is Oracle. U01 app info server, let's say info shade, and this is a bad file directory. So here you'll have all the bad files. I think yesterday we have run it around sometime 909, not this one. Maybe if you sort it by the change date. So this is the last bad file record. So irrespective of whether it is throwing the error or not, it will create all the bad files. So let me just delete it all. It's a waste of memory. So here it will create the bad files. In case if the data is rejected, you can actually verify the bad file and understand what records have been rejected by the Informatica. So that way you can also validate about the bad file records and everything. So the next thing is about the performance testing. It's as usual, you just collect all the statistics and then do it. And the next one is regression testing. And in this example, the regression testing is not applicable in using it, right? So that will complete the process, like that will complete the process of validating the data for a router transformation. See, basically we are understanding one example for each type of a program in the ETL testing process in the Informatica. See, when you go to the other ETL tools, this process might be different. I mean, they might use a different transformation. That's why I'm not much stressing on the transformation logic and everything. I'm not going in deep about it. So when you're working with other ETL tools like Ab initio, or let's say a data stage or an ODI, so then this whatever the terminology that you're using and everything will not be same. So mostly you have to concentrate on the mapping of the data and how the data is being transformed, understand the data mapping sheet and convert the SQL queries. I mean, try to get SQL queries and then validate the data. That's how you have to learn it. And one more thing is that since Informatica is being used in the most of the projects, I mean, if you compare the market share and all, you'll have Informatica projects more compared to other ETL tools. So learning this also will be helpful, and it will be more effective when you're doing the testing and all, when you go for a complex projects and all. So that completes your another example about the router transformation. So we have seen only 3 transformations so far. That is your router, filter, and then the expression, how it will be used. So if you have any questions on this front, like you can go ahead now. Else we'll move on with the next example, which is a bigger one, which is like joiner, sorter, and aggregator transformation.
Karthik, actually in the mapping, regarding mapping, Informatica Power Center is there, right? So as a tester, we have to verify anything here.
I think we already discussed this. Like if you have to verify, in the sense you need to do the smoke testing, basically whether the mapping is present or a workflow and the session is present. And in case sometimes what the developer does is
what I'm asking is sometimes some aroma is like a red color kind of, right? So like that we have to verify all the mappings.
It's basically you're verifying the validity of the mapping, whether it is valid or invalid. So if you see this red color bubble, that means it's an invalid mapping. you'll not have a red color arrow marks basically. Red color arrow marks will not be there, and linking of the columns basically, if you look at it, whether some columns are missed to connect, all those things you have to verify. Small connectivity between the transformations. That's linking of the transformations, and the validity of the mapping. That is what you have to verify. And if you're comfortable enough, I mean, you can even understand like what logic is being implemented. And it is not true that all the projects you'll have access to the Informatica tools. Maybe you'll have access to only Workflow Monitor, and wherein you can identify the job status and everything. May not be to other tools also. Some projects, and in few projects they'll even give access to the a repository as well. Okay. The next one which we are going to discuss is a little bigger one, and we are going to understand use of 3 different transformations basically. That is called as a m_ODS order amount. Okay. So here we are going to understand about the 2 sources. In this example, we have 2 sources. One is called as a order.txt, which will contain the order data, and it's a tab delimited file. It's a tab delimited file. And you have another source called as a product. It is a relational table, and there is a common column between these 2 sources that is called as a product code. We are going to join these 2 things by using a joiner transformation. We'll see that. And you have a target table. So your target table is going to be the ODS underscore order amount, and the mapping which you have to verify is m_ODS underscore order amount. m_ODS order amount, and the workflow which is loading the data into this is here WF underscore ODS order amount. See, basically again you have a flat file which is involved. So what we do is we will actually import again the order.txt file data into our some dummy table, and then start validating the data. So I'm not concentrating much on the smoke testing from this example. I'm directly jumping onto the functional testing part. So let's take a look at the order.txt file. See, basically order.txt file is available in the info shade source file directory. Here you'll have all the source files which will be mentioned. And in case if the file is not present over here, you can also request your Informatica development team to provide you the proper file and everything. Okay. So now I have to import this data. See, there was a question which I actually received from one of the learner, saying that in the previous example we have actually imported the data from flat file to the relational table. Is it that in the testing environment every day the tester has to import that file and then process the data? No. This is why we are importing the data into the table, is because it will become easy for testing the data. So who will provide this file? Either you can copy the file from the server to your local machine and then do it, or you can request your development team to provide you the file which you have to test it. Suppose every day you don't need to test, maybe for 1 or 2 files you can import those files, and then maybe 2 times you can verify the data and then leave it. See, the process of importing and all, why we are creating these tables, it's just for a testing, and everything else, the data movement from the file to the table will happen completely with Informatica only. You don't need to do it manual process. There is no manual process involved in the Informatica. So as your assumption is correct, saying that all the jobs will be scheduled and the data will be moved from your flat files to the target database, whether it is a warehouse or a staging table. So why we are creating a separate table and importing is just that it helps us to test that easily. That is the reason we are doing it. Okay. So now when you verify this order.txt, so it's basically, it has an order date and it has a product and you also have a quantity. So what you do, let's first import this table and we'll start understanding the data mapping sheet and everything. Okay. So let me just go here and then create a table. I call this as order input, some flat file, some table which I'm creating. When you look at this, like let's say I have a date input. So date input, let's consider it as a date and try whether we can import it. And another column what we have here is a product, and product, I think it's going to be the number, and you have even the quantity, and this is also going to be the number. So we have order input. So let me just create this table. It is created. Now let me go to my ETL testing folder and convert this order.txt, which is a tab delimited file, into a TSV file, tab separated value file. So if I go here, sorry, ETL testing source files, we have order.txt. So let me just convert it as order.tsv, in fact. So in order to save this, open it and convert it as all files and mention it as order.tsv. So now let me just, it's text file, okay, that's a TSV file. So now I have to import this data. So expand it. So when you go to the tables, you have order underscore input. I think I have to refresh this. I don't see that table, that's fine. Okay, it's here. And we have to import the data first of all. So just right click on it and import data. So this is your order.tsv. So just click on this one and next. So data is loaded. There are total 199 records. I think 199 records have been imported in this. Okay, so now we have got the data in the table, and there is another table also, your source table, that is your product. So if you try to verify, that is also a relational table. So select star from SDBU dot product, what it is. So try to verify the data. We have a data even here also. Now let's try to first load the data into this joiner one, that is your ODS order amount, and understand the logic, like what is behind this. Okay, so when you verify, let's say you have to load the data into this. Okay, so let me run it and see the workflow completion, how many records are rejected and all those. So let's verify whether it is succeeded or not. ODS order amount, for some reason it has thrown the error. Following error occurred while sequential 701. So let's see the error, what is there in the session log. Not sure what is this. Okay. Error occurred initializing the recovery for target. Okay, let me just verify. Give me a minute. Okay, there was some issue with the recovery. So it has read from the flat file, it has read 199 records, and the 80 records have been read from the product, and 103 have been loaded into the target. There are no rejected records, and you can verify the session log for a source queries and from which file it has read the data and all those, and what is the path of the file. See, basically when sometimes if you don't know from which path it is reading the data, from which file it is reading the data, even if you open a session log, you can easily understand from which path it is reading. So this is a source query which is generated by Informatica to read the data from product, and this is from the flat file, from which flat file it is reading the data, reading the input from the source file order.txt, and so on. I mean, like you can also look for any errors or warnings which it has. So all those things can be verified. Now let's take a look at the understanding of this data mapping sheet, like how we have to start converting this into this. See, basically we have two heterogeneous transformations, and heterogeneous in the sense one is a flat file, another is a relational table. So when you have a heterogeneous transformations, like you're going to join them, basically you're joining the flat file and the relational table based on the product code. See, in SQL you cannot join one flat file and the one relational table, but we have imported a flat file already into a relational table. It's just like joining two relational tables for us. So let's take a look at the mapping, which is loading the data into this. It's basically they are reading the data from two products, and this they have product as well as order. So they're joining it based on the joiner transformation. So one thing which we have to understand is that, like, what is a join condition between these two sources? Like, to verify the join condition, you can understand this joiner transformation. So what is the condition here? Like a product code from the product table is joined with a product and the detail table. So when you go to the properties here, you can understand like what type of join it is used. So using this joiner transformation, just like your SQL, you can perform the different types of joins. You can perform a normal master outer, detail outer join, and all those things. See, when you see about the master outer and detail outer, let's say whenever the joiner transformation is used, what you have to know is that what is the condition that is used to join the two sources. You need to know the condition. And the second thing is about the type of join, like what type of join that is being used, and appropriate join you have to replace in the SQL. So these are the two things that you have to know whenever they use a joiner transformation to do that. How many types of joins are there? Basically, if you look at it in Informatica, just like your SQL, it's a normal join. Normal join is like an inner join, which will give you the matching data, and you have a master outer join. So there is something called as a master outer join. Whenever the master outer join is being used, you just replace that by the right outer join, right outer join, and you have something called as a detail outer join. And whenever you see the detail outer join here, and that should be replaced by the left outer join in the list. And if you save full outer join here, and that should be replaced in the same way, it has to be replaced with a full outer join again in this. So this is how you have to start validating the data. I mean, like you have to understand. And what is a condition? Condition is basically the product code. Product code that you have it in the product source is equal to the product. So this is what which you. And afterwards, once you join it, the next thing is about the sorting of the data. So joiner transformation is an active transformation. Sorter transformation is also active. Whenever you see the sorter transformation is just like an order by clause. So as long as sorter transformation uses an order by and it is not eliminating the duplicate records, it's a passive. So we need to verify. Sometimes developers might also use a sorter transformation to eliminate the duplicate records. Basically, they select this option, distinct option. Whenever they have a distinct option, and replace that distinct option also. Replace that distinct option, whatever you have, whatever the distinct option that you have, that you should be replace that with a distinct in the source query. And the next transformation is about the aggregator. So what should you know about the aggregator? Whenever you see aggregator, just replace that by the group by clause, and all you need to know is like what are all the columns used for a grouping of the data, right? So if you see, you need to know what are all the columns that are used for grouping of the data, and what are the what are the conditions that they have used, what aggregate functions they have used, that is your total quantity, average price, and the minimum cost. All these things, what aggregate functions they are using. So group by columns that you have to know, and functions, aggregate functions are used, which aggregate functions are used, and appropriately all the aggregate functions, whatever you see in the Informatica, it will also be same in the Oracle also. So there will not be much difference in this. Okay. Aggregator transformation. So now let's try to build a source query. So it's basically what they're doing. They're joining based on the product code, and they're using a normal join. They're sorting the data and aggregating the data. So when they're aggregating the data, they're calculating sum, average, minimum cost, and all those things which they are doing. Okay. So let's try to build a query here. So when you try to use it, select from, and you have both the things. One is your order input, right? So order input, and you have a product. So they're using a normal join. So we'll also use an inner join here, and then the product table. So this product table is basically in the SDBU schema. If it is present in the another database, basically you have to use the DB link, right? So let's say @DB link in case if it is present in the other database. In our case, it is present in the same, so I'm just commenting that DB link. And what is the condition that you are using? So let me just call this as a O and this as a P. So I'm just aliasing this as a P. So what is the condition? O dot product is equal to P dot product code, which you have. And let's say what are all the columns that you're fetching? You're fetching basically order date, product code, and vendor ID, and you're not transforming anything after that. And you're using an order by clause. So just use an order by clause. Order by, what are all the columns? Let's say O dot order date. I think we have O dot order date. Let's say comma P dot product code. So this column also you're pulling it up. Check from the product, you're pulling the product code. And let's say vendor ID as well. I think you have a vendor ID even on the P dot vendor ID. Vendor ID. And other columns like quantity, price, and cost. Quantity, price are coming, quantity is coming from the order table, and price and cost are coming from the product. I mean order flag file, I mean to say. So O dot quantity. Next one is your P dot price and P dot cost. So this is till the sorter transformation, we have transformed the query. And what are the columns that they are ordering the data? It doesn't make the difference in the result, but as per the logic, we are transforming this query. So this is a initial set of a query. Like this is a first query before the aggregator. Like what and all are the other things that you are doing. So when you look at the use of aggregate functions and everything, right now when you see select from, so what and all are the columns? You need an order date, right? So O dot order date, or you can call this as, let's say, first level of source qualifier. So I call it as SQ, and you can call this as a SQ dot order date, and you have SQ dot product code. So basically I'm using an inline view, and you have something called as a SQ dot vendor ID, and you need to know the total quantity. So what is the aggregate function that they have used and how they are calculating? First one is total quantity, average price, and the minimum cost. So use total quantity is nothing but the sum of SQ dot quantity, sum of SQ dot quantity. So which I call this as a QTY, or you can call it as a total quantity or whatever. And the next one is about the average price. So you need to use SQ dot price in this, using this. So this one is called as a AVZ price or something, which you can alias it. And the next one is about your minimum cost. So the minimum of SQ dot cost, so which I call it as minimum cost in using this. And what are the columns that are used for a group by in the aggregator? So use that columns in the grouping the data. Obviously you have to use these columns, otherwise the query will become invalid. So this is going to be your source query. I've just converted your joiner, sorter, and aggregator transformation into the query. Now when you try to see, like O dot order date is an invalid identifier. Okay. And what is a column that we have used here? Column name. So I think it is a date in. So let me just use date input, and I'll alias this as order date in this. Let me try and execute once again the query. O dot order date. Okay. Okay. Now this is a data. This is your source query. So basically you have a complete source query. What I've transformed is I've transformed the aggregator logic, joiner logic, and everything. So this is going to be your source query. So from this, the functional testing is easy. I'm not and validating the count of records, validating the duplicate validation, null values, each and everything. We can quickly do that. So let me just start first with the count validation of the records. So this is your source query. So take the source query and find out the count of records returned by the source query. So how do you use it? Let's say select count of star from whatever the query that you have. I'm just pasting that in between the parentheses. Now let's get the source count, right? So you have total 103 records which are returned by your source query, and your target query is going to be select count of star from, let's say, ODS underscore order amount. This is your target table. So ODS underscore order amount. So try to execute this. So this also will should give 103 records. So I don't have any mismatch of the data between the source and target. So everything is perfect and we're good with this. So similarly, the second one is about the duplicate record validation. Duplicate record validation. So how do you verify the duplicate records? You need to know the structure of the target table. It's basically, it has a product code, order date, vendor ID. So just write select product code. You need to know the columns and order date, vendor ID, and you have a quantity, price, and the cost. So see, basically most of the times if you're validating the staging tables, include the measurable columns also, because the data will not be aggregated. Quantity and price and the cost. If you're validating the duplicate validation for a fact tables, do not include the measure columns. Try including only the dimensional columns. These are all like a measure columns, but since it is a staging table, I'm including it. So maybe in the staging table it might be repeated, but it should not be repeated in the fact table. So from what is your target table, that is your ODS underscore order amount, and you have this complete number of columns. Just group the data and understand from it. So try to execute, and you should have a condition, that is you're having count of star greater than 1. So try and execute this. This will give you the number of records present in your, duplicate records. If at all, if it is present, it will give you. So the third one is about the column level data validation. So it's just that once you prepare a source query, everything else is just that you just have to validate. So this is the source query. You need to run a minus query between the source and the target. So Control C and minus. So you need to use a target table as well. So let me just copy this. So you need to place the order of the columns is main important. Okay, so if you look at it, let me just take a look at the order of the columns. So first column is order date. So let me just shuffle this. Next one is a product code followed by the vendor ID, quantity, price, as well as a cost, and we don't need this. Now we need to validate the data between the source and the target. So it's exactly matching. You don't have any issues with between the source and target, like how the data is being loaded between the source and target and the minus query validation. Similarly, you need to proceed for the null value validation. Null value validation. So what it is like, and just use the same columns again, like order date as having a null value, or the product code is having a null value, or vendor ID is having a null value. Likewise, so order date, let's say the count of star from ODS order amount, where order date is null. Order date is null. And similarly, you need to know for a product code and the vendor ID. So if you have to know for other columns, other measurable columns also, you can just mention that. So one by one, you can execute and verify. So you have to include all the columns. I'm just showing you for an example. I'm just showing you only one, one or two columns to simplify the query. You need to write for all the queries. So this is how you have to do that. And the next one is your referential integrity is not applicable. And system testing is just like the old example. We don't have any parameter file which is referred in this, and email task validation and all those things, and so on the performance testing also. So it's the same process that so this is also the same one, and the performance testing is also right. So that is how you can validate the data. So this is another example. Okay, that completes your this example about the joiner transformation. So if you have any questions probably on this, so this is something that which we have seen multiple, multiple transformations in the same example. So this is how the mappings will be in the real time, not like only one transformation will be used. So this is your ODS order amount. So I'll send you all the SQL queries probably just right away now. So if you have any questions, probably you can go ahead and we'll discuss. Okay. So if you're good, that's fine. I mean, I'm just, if it is a pipe delimited file, we have to convert this file into what format? It is not a pipe delimited file. I don't think we can convert, because I think that you have to probably paste that first into a Excel file and divide that into a normal format, and then you have to do that. I don't think we can convert pipe delimited. I mean, import the pipe delimited file. It's only TSV and all. I don't know. Pipe delimited file, we can import it. You probably have to use a Excel sheet and take that file into Excel sheet, and you can divide the data in the Excel sheet in the form of CSV or something, and then import it. If it is a XLS file also, you can import it. Just convert. If you see import, it will also read the data from XLS and XLSX. DSV, I don't know what is DSV. Okay, I'll just right away send the files. Thank you. That's it I have.
I have this doubt, like I mean, the sum of SQ.quantity is matched with O.quantity in the select query of SQ. I didn't understand that.
This clause why we have used, that's what you.
Yeah, I mean, that is the value of that is of the O.quantity in SQ, right? Because you're saying from
Yes.
the select query is.
Yeah, true. Like how?
I didn't understand how the sum of that quantity is equal to the quantity of joining of two tables alone.
Okay, when you see this quantity table, right? I mean, when you see this quantity column, this is something that which is coming from the source. Okay. And if you go and verify the aggregator transformation, in the aggregator transformation itself, you have this clause saying that some of the quantity is being written into, some of the quantity is being calculated and it is being assigned to the O.quantity. I mean, that is nothing but a output port. Okay. So when you're grouping the data, whatever the quantity is available for all these group columns, that value is calculated and assigned to the O.quantity column, O_quantity. And that O underscore quantity column, if you look at the mapping, this is being assigned to the quantity column in the target. So it's basically when we are grouping the data, we are calculating the total quantity, average price, and the cost. Okay. So what aggregator transformation does is it calculates all these values as per the function. So if I look at this aggregator transformation, similarly, after sorting the data, whatever the quantity is there, you are calculating the total quantity by grouping the data using these columns. Right. So by grouping the data using these columns, so that is why I have used sum of sq.quantity, which is nothing but a order flat file quantity.
Okay. So order underscore input is a source table.
Yes.
Source table, right?
Yeah, it's a flat file which we have imported and then got into the data into this. Right. I have created a table. And order.txt is a tab delimited file, and I have created a table and I have imported that into the table.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Karthik.
Yeah. Okay then. Thank